Hello, welcome back to Legit Bat, live show for you. It's been a bit, and sorry for pummeling everyone this week. I'm on vacation, so we've done show after show this week, it seems like. So we are joined today by Howdie Mickoski, and Matt from The Great Deception is co-hosting in place of Ben today. How's it going, Matt?
Good. How you guys doing?
Fantastic. So glad you could make it with all the bullshit going on at your house. So I'm not Greg Carlwood, so I don't do like 3 paragraphs of introduction. I kind of let the guests do that themselves. So Howdy, introduce yourself however you would like.
Okay. Hey guys, thanks for having me on to do a talk for you. And right now, I have a simple answer. I'm trying my best to stay sane in a very insane reality. And I guess that'll be the discussion point of our show. What would you like me to talk about as an introduction? Would you like what sort of background would you be interested in knowing?
Just what actually got, I know some of your history and some of the terrible things you had to deal with in your life. And if people want to know about that, they can go listen to the Higher Side Chats episode you did with Greg. What pointed you specifically in the direction of all these crazy things you're looking at? Was it one thing, or did you just kind of get into it on accident, or how did that all happen?
Yeah, kind of. If somebody watched that Higher Side Chats, that's for a complete viewpoint, but it's been like a giant stepping stone of going through my own personal trauma, dealing with that, going through 10 or 15, maybe 10 years of studying ancient Egypt, alchemy, Hermeticism, the time I spent with native medicine men and the Korean monk, then going through a death experience about 15 years ago, all the things that came through from that experience, moving forward to looking into getting the insight of needing to look into history and the world fairs like you find seeing of the Chicago exposition behind Matt there. And then slowly in the last 2.5 years, moving back into a more Gnostic Cathar view of reality where it's ripping apart ripping apart the fabric of this world and asking, what is this place really? So it's been a giant 25-year stretch of time in which I've gone through really valuable periods. I've gone through periods of difficulty and challenge. I've gone through periods where I've been somewhat arrogant and thinking I know a lot. I've gone through periods where I think I don't know anything at all. And thankfully, for some strange reason, over the last couple of years, it's come to a point where people feel they're getting value hearing me talk and reading my book. So here we are.
Awesome. How many books have you written now? You're on
In
you're
sort
working
of
on
on
the
these
second one.
fields, it's four.
4, okay. So, Howdy's new
Yeah,
book
the
is
Power of Then was the first one. Sorry, the Power of Then was the first one. That's on ancient Egypt and symbolism and alchemy. Falling for Truth is about my death experience and kind of a semi-attack against standard spirituality, exposing the expositions on mostly the World's Fairs, but the historical realm of the 1800s. And then my new one, Exit the Cave, which is more about the idea of simulation, Plato's cave, reincarnation. Yeah, so those are the main 4 package of what's out.
awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Your book number 2 on Exit the Cave is gonna be coming out next year, right?
I hope so. I'm just getting it out now. It just actually the print version is like coming out now finally in the next couple of days. So I mean, we'll see. We have we have to be honest. We have no idea where our reality is going. We have no idea where because this thing is spinning and it's spinning in a bizarre way. In one sense, that's good, and we can get to all that point of why the chaos is good for some people. But in general, it's also meaning a lot of people are starting to ask a lot of questions about a lot of different areas they've never gone to. And I think that's kind of the focus of Exit the Cave. Exit the Cave is really for someone who comes to or listens to this interview. I mean, I'm going to sound probably very negative in a lot of this interview. Um, and that's okay because the end result of all the negative talk is actually to me something very positive. It's finding your true nature, it's finding your true self, it's finding the truth of what you are in reality. The problem is we have so many blinder walls in front of us, belief structures, and generally what's interesting, everybody has the same basic foundation belief structures. So when I start talking about the stuff I talk about now, it hits everybody, and a lot just will shut it down and say, "Well, he's just wrong because he's saying something I don't like, as opposed to, yeah, why don't you go with where I'm going with this? It's a thesis. I don't know what's going to happen after death for sure. I don't know exactly how this reality was created, but 25 years have given me some insights. Just go with it for a while, see if it leads you to some interesting questions, because that's what it's all about. It's finding what's inside yourself. It's what you truly know. The problem is you have to get through this blinder wall to even actually see what it is you really know. And that's what the work was about. That's what the Korean monk was doing with us 25 years ago. Even we didn't know that's what he was doing. It's kind of like it took us 20 years looking back now to start figuring out, oh, that's what he was doing back then. Oh yeah, okay. We just thought he was
Yeah.
an idiot, uh, having fun irritating us, but he was actually not. He was showing us our garbage.
And that's one of the things, Howdy, that I love about your perspective is you're not you've basically told everyone, listen, I can't prove anything for the most part, but what I can do is I can start disproving the lies, and I can get rid of them and get them out of the equation, and then focus my attention in a different direction. And that's changed my perspective on the way I do research and things, because for the longest time I was trying to prove things, and
Yeah.
it's self-sacrificing. You're not making any progress when you're going on a
No.
mission to prove something,
Right.
because you're going to use cognitive dissonance a lot of times to take out the information you don't want to hear. And so I really respect that approach that you have, to be able to say, okay, listen, I may not have the answer, but what I can tell you what's not true, and then we can start working off of that point. And I think that's big for a lot of people nowadays.
Thanks, Matt. I think that's one of the greatest pieces anybody can take from anything. It's that idea that it was, and I kind of got that. I understood it more from reading some of Richard Rose's work before he died, which is the idea of you don't really know what truth is. If you knew what truth was, you'd already be there. So as long as you're still having to look for it, you instead have to, yeah, find false. And there's always lots of false we can find. So you find something false, and it's important not just to find it. You have to let it go. You have to drop it. You have to get rid of it, and then you go look for some other false. And so it's also this: you have to look in many different areas, many different pieces, and eventually you'll get to the one thing that you just cannot drop. There'll be one thing eventually that, try as hard as you might, you can't drop it, and then you realize, oh, that's the truth. And it should be generally for ones who are being honest about it, because of course there's lots of people lying, to make a good amount of money and sell books to say, I know everything now. I'm enlightened. I've got the truth. I've got these 80 books. You just buy them. But generally, the ones that I've come across that I feel the most honestly that they've touched something truthfully, they always will describe it when they come to this point of like, it's not anything of what I thought it was going to be. And it was something similar when I had my death experience and the things I revealed. It was nothing like I ever thought an experience like that should be. And that gave it more truth to it, because if you go after something and you find exactly what you're expecting, then you don't know if it's, did I just make it myself? Did I just manifest it? Did I just create what I wanted to create? If it comes to you and it's so, and again, it's true, but it's so different than you've ever thought. That's kind of what it was like with the World's Fairs, Matt. I mean, when I first started looking into the Chicago Exposition, um, I thought I knew what I was going to find when I first started studying it. And within like a week, I was just thrown on so many different levels of like, what? What? This is insane. What? This is insane. And I had to realize, okay, I know nothing about this at all, zero. And I had to actually start from like literally a 5-year-old child and say, okay, I know nothing about this. I'm going to start clean. And that's kind of, I think that's the path for anything.
Oh, and I gotta say, your book is like the intro to so many people into the World's Fairs, um, because I think your approach is one, but you also start exposing it layer by layer, and you show that it not only was it Chicago, it happened in London, it happened in Paris, it happened in Philadelphia, New York, St. Louis. You go all over, and they all meet a similar fate. They're all destroyed. They leave one or two behind. But there's, I know you mentioned a lot, they lose money. And these people are businessmen. And we know that they do not like to lose money. And for them to keep rolling these fairs out one after another, and there has to be a bigger message to these things. There has to be
Right.
more to them, than just a fair. And I think your book does such a great job of showing that listen, there was more to this agenda. There was, you had human zoos, you had baby incubators, you had all sorts of technology and things in one arena. And then all of a sudden, after 6 months, poof, it's gone. And that's it. And we move on to the next one.
Which is exactly the same. That's the other key part. When you look at them closely, they're actually the same.
It's
which
almost like they
is
pick them up and move them in many instances. Some of these buildings, and just like it's like they pick them up, drop them in the new city, and the city choices are very interesting as well. I always, you look at Buffalo, you look at Omaha, some of these places at the time you don't really know much, and then you start digging into the history and the land itself, and you see, oh, these are places of greater significance than we were told, and not in this time period, but in a different time period.
Yeah.
Just
Cool.
amazing.
I think that's one of the most interesting things that you brought up on the higher side chat is that idea that the simulation, if you were in one, could possibly only be 5 days old or a day old. Like you said, the Dark City reference, I was like, wow, yeah, that actually makes sense. So the other part was what Matt was talking about with the baby incubators. It makes total sense that they would want, a fresh crew of people to be able to indoctrinate real easily right after a reset. If they're children, they have no memory of what might have gone on before that. So it's just a blank slate bringing them in, and this is your reality now. And how, here's what your history looked like for the last 1,000 years. And I think the one thing we can all agree on is that there's a lot of things in history that are like verifiably not true, but trying to figure out how to prove that's kind of hard since we aren't there, and all we have to go on is books that the victors wrote.
Yeah, and okay, so we're moving into the discussion topic now for those of you listening. So what Joe's sort of describing, for those of you who maybe don't recognize his comment, this idea that I brought up, others are bringing up, of course, now that this might be a simulation, that we're in some sort of simulated reality. And I use the term just for the standpoint of a metaphor. I don't say it's an actual simulation, or I don't say it's like an actual computer program, but we can use that as a metaphor. So the problem becomes, okay, if it is some type of artificial, well, it isn't, we know it's an artificial realm. My own experience has taught me it's an artificial realm. But if we use the simulation model, a simulation starts at a particular time. There's a particular day one of any video game when the game starts, February 1874. That's the day that the video game starts. Okay. The problem is we have a history of tens of thousands of years. Maybe, scientists try to tell us it's billions of years old. But if we're in a simulation, there's a particular date when the simulation began, day one. Let's just use, just for the sake of our conversation, 1900, because it's an even date. Let's say it's 1900. That means all of our history after 1900 occurred from the standpoint of the reality we've come to experience. But everything we think of as prior to 1900 doesn't exist at all. It's just a copy of something put in its backstory. It's like it's the robots on Westworld. The robots on Westworld have what they believe is a giant history in their personal memory bank, but that's just backstory that's been plugged into them. They're still just robots, and they've lived an X number of years, but they think they've lived 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And that's, so it's one thing if we're saying, oh, the simulation, started in 1900 and that's all of our history. But then, like Joe said, well, what if the simulation is 12 days old? What if the simulation started 12 days ago? Therefore, the only real, actual, tangible experiences we've had are the last 12 days, and everything before that is just backstory, just something that was plugged into us before the simulation was switched on. And here's the problem: we don't know. We really don't know. And trying to even figure it out is challenging. I'm not saying we're in the last 5 days of the simulation, but my guess is it could be anywhere from 20 to 30 years to maybe 2 to 3 or 400. I don't think it's much older than that, actually, the simulation itself. But when you hear what the Gnostics and the Cathars have to say specifically, very good sources of information, they claim this is a copy. That's a very important word. They claim our reality is a copy. So if it's a copy, what is it a copy of? And that makes it very interesting. Say, okay, the simulation started in 1860. Okay. So that means 1859 and the buildings we have and the stories we have, in a sense, they're real, but not from our realm. They're real from the realm that it's copied from. So there's a realness to it, but it'll cause a problem, Joe, like you say, of looking back to it, because it won't actually totally, what's the word I'm looking for? It won't totally fit into the way our realm is constructed. So when we're looking back at the past at a certain point beyond wherever the simulation started, it'll never seem right. It'll never fit right, because it's a copy of somewhere else. And this thing is going in its own direction, its own way, its own whatever. So when you begin to feel that is possibly true, it helps when you start to look at historical events, because you don't feel the confusion starts to make sense. Oh yeah, I can understand ancient Egyptian pyramids, because they probably weren't built in our realm. They were built in this other realm, and they're copies of those, and we don't really know what they are, because they're not even from our universe. I don't know if any of you guys have been, like, for example, spent a lot of time in Egypt or at the sites in Mexico or Peru. But like when I'm at Giza, or I'm at Dashur, I'm at Abu Sir, I'm at Teotihuacan, I feel like I'm in another universe. Energetically, I don't feel like if I'm at just an ancient site, some old sites, I still feel like I'm here. But when I'm at those places, I literally feel like energetically, yeah, that's the best word I can describe it. I'm in another universe, and it's why I love going to these places, not just for what's there and the research and the study. It was because I actually feel so centered, so clear, so aware, because I know on some level I'm not actually touching this reality. I'm touching some other place where these things originated.
Yeah, and
It's almost like
that's
a
what I love
portal,
that.
right? Where you're reaching in and reaching out kind of thing. You know, you're half in, half out because you're standing here, but you're feeling that energy from the other world.
Kind of. I mean, like, if we take what are known as Egyptian false doors, Egyptian false doors do feel like a portal. And I've talked about this in my old books and some other things of how I think those false doors work, the portal, how the effects they've had on me. Like, um, if you're ever at an Egyptian false door, what I've done is, if I stand facing the false door, you might have to, if you don't know what we're talking about, just look up like Egypt false door, Saqqara false door, whatever. But if I stood facing like this way towards them, it was nothing. It was just me looking at the door. But as soon as I turned around, so my back was to that false door, I instantly felt a pull, and it was like dragging me. And I had to actually like have put roots on my feet to actually stand still. And the few times that I didn't, that I just said, okay, I'm going with this, I was literally dragged into the false door, and I blacked out for like a second. I hit the door, and I unblacked out. I was here, but I know if maybe you've done some ceremony, some ritual, some whatever, that would have been your portal, and you would have gone through. So when you're saying portal, I see them as like places like this on the site, but the site itself, I can't describe it as a portal, because it's like it's not that it's linked to somewhere else. It is somewhere else.
Yeah, it's
Like
that
that, that's just
energetic,
bizarre to me.
like the ley
It's
line
completely,
reality.
it's actually there, but I'm here, but you're touching it there. So it's not even like a portal that moves you there. You're already there, even though you're here. It's very hard to describe.
Like, it's out of phase with this, current reality or something. I've heard that,
Yeah,
described like that a
yeah,
lot. And yeah, that's
yeah,
why I love this idea that you brought up, because it explains a lot of, historical anomalies like the pyramids and Göbekli Tepe and all these old things that nobody really has any explanation for, and they keep pushing the date back further, or maybe it was 14,000 years, or, pre-flood, post-flood, whatever. And even the Great Flood, I mean, that could be some kind of anomaly too. Like we said, there's no way to know, but it does remind me a lot of the Matrix, not so much in a computer simulation, but of the copy of the world. It's such a perfect,
yeah.
uh, analogy to it, because it's a copy of the world that used to exist, but when you pop out of that, then it's a completely different world. The sky is scorched, and who knows what our, reality actually looks like. But I know a lot of people that agree with you that say this is a copy, or as Andy says, a mimicry. He thinks that everything is a mimicry, and almost a perversion of the real world, or I don't even know how to put it. How do you put into words something that you don't really know? I think you've done a much better job at it than I.
Well, I've just tried to listen to what others have told me. I know some medicine men that I knew back in Canada. They told me it's a shadow world, or it's an opposite world, that everything is upside down here. So that was how they kind of described it to me. Um, I even think of, if people are looking into movies, because my chapter 8 of my new book is looking just at movies and television shows. I'm looking at, yeah, Westworld and Lost and Donnie Darko, but Dark City to me, which I think is the original Matrix. I think actually the Matrix is a movie that is born out of Dark City, because, and it's weird. If you really look into Dark City in detail, you will see that it's the Matrix, like 100 years or 1,000 years before. And so there you've got this idea. Here's Dark City, the city just floating in space. It's a copy of something. We're not told where it's from. We don't know where the humans have come from. We don't know how they've got there. We know nothing about anything. So it's Plato's cave. And like I talk about in chapter 2 of the new book, Plato's cave is actually missing more information than it is in any way giving information. Plato's cave is like as an analogy, it's like a giant almost misdirection at times. But Dark City, when you watch, and I don't want to throw too much away of the movie for if you're seeing it, but it seems like it has this happy ending. People will see the movie Dark City as, here's John Murdoch, who is the original one. Now, remember in the Matrix, they tell Neo there was a one before you. There was one who had, and that's John Murdoch from Dark City. And because if you look closely, when you see the area Zion in the second Matrix, that is the place where the strangers were living in Dark City. Because actually they used the same two sets. The Matrix filmed on all the sets of Dark City. So it's the same buildings that they're jumping on. It's the same stairway. So it's not it everything about the two movies are actually linked visually and even timeline. But what's interesting is when that movie ends, people feel it's a happy ending. Oh, he's reclaimed the city. These alien strangers are gone. He's back with his girlfriend, even though the girlfriend doesn't remember who she is and doesn't know who he is. But okay, he's back with her, and it's sunlight. Everything's great. But nobody is awakened. Nobody actually knows who they are. Nobody knows the nature of their reality. No one knows they're floating in outer space. And if we see that the Matrix is Dark City in 1,000 years, then we see that, well, that's the world that got scorched. That's the world that got destroyed. That's the world that these robot beings took over and impotted all the humans. So for all that John Murdoch achieved, did he achieve anything at all? The Matrix, I think that's the real Dark City reference of where it goes, is that as long as you're trying to fix this reality, it's not going to work for you. And that leads to the whole premise of my book. What I'll say something and I'll shut up and let you guys talk. Is that I think the standard foundation that we as a general, and I had it for a long, long time, the foundation belief is this is a place made by a loving God who cares about us, who built this realm for our experience and our growth as a learning tool so that our soul can grow and we can eventually rise out of this realm and rejoin this creator again. And that's the story we're told. But the Gnostics and the Cathars and some ancient civilizations, they had a different story. And that story was, yeah, there is this, and they don't call it a good force. They call it an absolute force, something that is just, it's total, it's complete. It's not good or bad, it's everything. But there was a split, and something split from that, an evil being, a lot of it is a demiurge, the Rex Mundi, Lucifer, whatever you want to call it, and created this realm. And it created this realm as a trap to take divine sparks from this original place into this realm and keep us trapped here. And if that is true, as I'm beginning to see that explains a lot about how our realm is, how our realm is structured, what we're really doing here, and more importantly, why we're wasting our energy trying to fix it when our energy should be spent on going home.
Is that kind of what you were getting at with the Plato's cave thing, that they're trying to figure out what reality is, but when they should just be getting the hell out of the cave?
Well, partially, I've got. So when it comes to Plato's cave, for that analogy, that's always been presented as the great spiritual analogy of reality. This is the explanation. Now, I always thought that was true because that's what the books told me to believe. So I thought, well, these people have been doing it longer than me, I guess, at the time. They must know more than me. So, oh, Plato's cave. And there is stuff in Plato's cave. which, quick nutshell, right? The story is, there's some, it's a story of Socrates talking to Plato's brother, and he explains that imagine if there were a group of prisoners and they're brought into a cave and they're placed in seats and they are held in place so that they can only see the wall in front of them, and then a fire is placed behind them. Shadow objects are placed in front of the fire, or objects are placed in front of the fire that create shadows on the walls, illusionary things that people start to believe are real, and that's how it kind of begins. But we're missing the initial first step. I can't believe no one's asking the initial question, and that is, well, what prisoners? Where are the prisoners coming from? Why are they prisoners? If they're prisoners, why aren't they in a prisoner of war camp? Why are they in a cave? Why do you want to have them in a cave anyway? Who built the cave? Is it a natural cave? Did these beings, whoever who are doing this thing, did they build the cave themselves? So we know nothing about the origin of the cave. We know nothing about the origin of the so-called prisoners, and we know that the prisoners are us. That's inferred in the allegory. So giving nothing of our origin, nothing is explained why whoever these beings are who are creating the fire and the shadow thing, why are they spending so much time to fool a bunch of prisoners in some cave that we don't know anything about? So we haven't even got into the detail of the story of Plato's cave. We're like literally at step one, and it's like, but here's all this important stuff is missing. Why? Why is that missing in the story?
Yeah, and how did that kind of describes the World Fair too? If you think about it, you brought all these people in, they were kind of under a spell. Most of them, had never seen buildings like this before. I mean, granted, the folks who were coming across from Europe and the elite who had money, yes, but the common folk that they brought into these fairs, this would have been a spectacle that like nothing they would have ever seen before. And then they're brought here, they go through what they spend usually about a couple days, if not a week there, and then they go back to their town and they spread this magical tale of this place that they saw there. But then after the fair's done, they just burn the whole thing up. So there's nobody else can go back and check it ever again. There's no real, they leave the one building, obviously, but I feel like that's in line with the cave, that they gave this to us and then just boom, took it away. And we don't
And
know.
and also when you're looking at it through that lens, trying to compare it to Plato's cave, because you've obviously looked at a lot of photographs, of course, like I have. The people look out of place. It's
Hmm.
not just like you say, oh, they've never seen stuff like this. It almost looks like they've never been anywhere before. In many cases, it looks like it's their first day on on Earth.
Yeah,
Like
they're
they
just
almost look like they haven't been anywhere. Like they literally just walked out of like a warehouse, and this is like their first day in the world. And I can't say that anything like that is true, but it's on the table of possibility. It's again, we know we had this giant wipeout of the world before that time, one way or another. We have a giant destruction of the world. We don't know what the population was and how much of the population was destroyed, and what an interesting way to re-indoctrinate the world. So if you throw it back into Plato's cave, it's a similar story. If we play this analogy, well, if the people haven't been like living in the world, where did they come from? How did they get manufactured? How do they all of a sudden show up at the fairs to, in a sense, be indoctrinated into the new world? So you can see if you're playing that road, yeah, you're playing that, you're asking the same questions that you'd be asking in Plato's cave. It's taking you down a similar line where the average person is already moving this direction. This is kind of, I was talking with even reading Plato's cave story. You start reading it, oh, I'm getting into it, but wait a minute, stop. Page one. We've got all these questions on page one that aren't here. Why aren't they there? We used to be a much longer story, and then it was edited out, as many religious and other texts were. They were whittled down. That's a possibility. Was it a completely different story? It was changed, or was the story written in this manner because it was actually meant as partial deception in the way it was being created? Again, we don't know, but these are all questions we should ask with any material like this, to be asking, what actually are we dealing with, and why are we dealing with it? We always again think, if someone, particularly if it's ancient, if it's something ancient, they're writing it, and they're really smart, and they're sharing something to help us, we don't step in and think this could be deception right from day one. That this could be a total fake right from day one. This could be designed to screw with us, and we don't start with that as an even possibility on the table. We trust the stuff, and I did too, right? I went to history. I went to university, a historian. I trusted a lot of stuff that, looking back, I never should have trusted without a second level of verification. And that's we're back to the early stuff we said. It's about finding false. It's about to find true, you find false, and to find false, you have to be honestly looking at every single thing you come across and asking, how can I prove it's true?
Yeah, and that's funny too, the so-called ancient stuff. I mean, we don't really have a way to verify it's as ancient as we're told it is either. So it could have been something way more recent that they're like, this is ancient, emerald tablets or any of that kind of stuff. But speaking of ancient stuff, I heard you briefly mention the Cathars. Go into that a little more because that's something I've only heard about recently.
Okay. What do you know about Cathars? Let's start there.
Very little. Matt, do you know anything about them?
They were wiped out by the Catholic Church. That's all I know. And I want to say they were Gnostics, and I think it was in the 1300s. I want to say that they were. I actually just heard someone mention them the other day and downloaded a couple books last night, and I'm about to start digging into them because I've heard they're interesting. But Howdy, it's all yours.
Okay. And, making sure, Jen, you just jump in whenever you want anything asked, just fire away. Make sure, I'm acknowledging your existence. Um, so the Cathars, we know very little about this group actually, because as Matt said, and actually it was, in the early 13th century, according to the history we're given, the Church of Rome decided they were too dangerous and needed to be exterminated in the first crusade against its own people, because they considered themselves to be Catholic, or true Christians is how they describe themselves, bonzom, true Christians. But the Catholic Church was very, I should say Catholic Church, the Church of Rome was very threatened by them. They're a group in southern France. We don't know where they came from. They're roughly coming at the exact same time as the Knights Templar. They're coming at the exact same time as the Grail romances are starting to be written in Provence and parts of Western Germany. They're at the same time as the wandering troubadours are giving stories of this very new type of courtly love that's going on through that part of the world. And you're all of this is mixed together into one giant pot of unknown stuff. And the Cathars had one main focus. They had two, I mean, they had a series of beliefs and structures in their system, which included equality for women, which included pacifism, which included general vegetarianism, a lot of ideas. But the main ones were: one, this is a world created by an evil god, which they called Rex Mundi, the equivalent of the demiurge to the Gnostics, and therefore nothing in this realm had any significance at all other than leaving. Two, that this was a trap that you were in a reincarnation trap, and their only job in life was to break that trap and to never return here. They began to get in trouble with the Christian church, and now I know, like, I only gave Joe the first 6 chapters of my book, and the 14th chapter 14 is all about the Cathars, and in fact a lot about southern France and a lot about the possibilities that the New Testament is really describing southern France and not the Middle East, which would change everything about that text and that document. And I've got like 14 parts on my YouTube channel if you want to go hear all the stuff I have to say about southern France and Rennes-le-Chateau and the Knights Templar. But the other one that the Knights that the by calling themselves good Christians, one of the things they were very clear about is also this is a simulation. So they rejected the story of Jesus dying for them on the cross for their sins. The reason they rejected that in that format was because they said he could not be the Son of God as presented, because he would have had to take a physical form. By taking a physical form, that would have immediately made him sin. So as soon as you're in the material world, you're in the realm of Rex Mundi, so you're sinned. So the only answer they could give, that the way that story could read as truthful, is if Jesus appeared in the world as a hologram. So if it was appeared as a hologram in which to transfer information to people, that to them made complete sense, and therefore elements of his teaching could be followed and used, and they felt they followed it absolutely as it was written in the scripture. But they took out anything that could have made him physical, because as soon as he became physical and was supposed to take the laws of matter, that would then destroy the whole story as it was presented. all of these kinds of things and their close connection to the Knights Templar, which is another group that I think gets wrongly presented in history. They'd like to try to make them early Freemasons, early control members. But to me, the Knights Templar are something very, very different and are almost the anti-side of all that. And I didn't go into it a massive amount in my book, but there I do have like I say, a video on that subject. The point being, the whole point of the chapter was the Cathars are supposed to have a particular ceremony known as the consolomatum. And the consolomatum was meant to end your cycles of reincarnation. Okay, sounds good. That's what my book's all about. How do we exit the matrix? How do we get out of the cave? So when I started looking into what is the consolomatum, what is actually going on, and if it is what the little bits we have presented, I don't think that's getting anybody out of the reincarnation trap at all. What it was it, and you had their main priests. They didn't call them priests; they called them perfecti. But it was a male and female, and they were balanced. There had to be a male, there had to be a female. So it was this combination of the two, the masculine and the feminine, always working together. And they claim that goes back to the original story, the real story of Jesus and the Magdalene, that they were a complete couple. They were a matching pair. So they did all their ceremonies like that. But the ceremony, as it's described, is the reading of some Gnostic Gospels, some Gospels from the New Testament, and the laying of hands down on the person who is going to get this cleansing of sin. And then when this ceremony was done, they were supposed to be free of reincarnation as long as they did not sin from that point on. What I've come to learn about how big the trap is here, how big the deception is, how many entities and beings are screwing with us on a daily basis, not just in this realm, but in the after death realm, in the pre birth realm, in the super duper realm, in the angel realm, and whatever. Either the Cathars themselves were fooled if that was their ceremony and they thought they were going to get out of here, and they didn't. Why we're hearing so many stories of people, I'm a reincarnated Cathar, or they really did have the secret information of how to get out of here. And even during the Inquisition, even with the inquisitors torturing them to death, they still wouldn't reveal the true secret of what their information was to get out of here. I'm not sure which side it falls on, but what we have as information that I present in the book, I don't think gets you out of here from a standpoint of reincarnation. So that's a short overview of the Cathars. If you have deeper questions, I can try to answer them as best I can. But again, we don't really know much about them. We only know what was told about them by the people who killed them off.
It makes sense that they'd want to, suppress that, especially if they had found a way to exit the reincarnation cycle. I heard you mention that maybe the Mayans were something similar to that. They were here, and all of a sudden, one day they just weren't. Like, or like you said, the Heaven's Gate cult. Maybe Haley's Comet did pick them up. Maybe they didn't actually die. They exited.
Yeah, that's another interesting story, isn't it? Because Cathars as a group are one. We don't really know what happened to them. Same thing with the Knights Templar. We don't really know what happened to them. We have these stories of what happened to them. We're not totally sure. We've got the Anasazi, if you're for you guys in the United States. So the Anasazi from the western part of the country, they just disappeared. Right, same thing. They were there one day. All their stuff was sitting on the tables, and like literally, they're gone. And the Maya, as a culture, almost the Mayan culture, same thing, just vanished. And what's so weird about the Mayans is when the archaeologists tried to find what happened to them, they really can't find bodies. Like they know they had 10, 20 million people at the time based on the size of their cities, but they've got no bodies. There's none. So there's no warfare. There's no like, where did they go? Then they try to come up with these ideas of, oh, there was some sort of famine and they all had to move to some other part of the world. Yeah, but where? And where are the bodies? It seems like they literally just vanished. So the potential theory is, and it's just a theory, nobody come after me on this one, it's just a possibility that certain groups in the past got to the point where they did understand that you could exit the matrix, you could exit the cave while still alive, that you didn't have to wait until death, which seems to be the best doorway you have to, I call it, return home. That they could do it while they were alive, and maybe they did it as a group. And maybe for some reason it's easier to do as a group rather than as an individual person. I mean, I don't know. I'm still working on this for the next book. This is some of the stuff I'm looking into. Is I kind of talked a lot about preparing yourself for the death experience in this current book, and trying to get to understand the astral realm, the after death realm. But now I'm sort of also looking at, okay, what can some of these groups tell us about, but can we just exit now? And maybe not so much the Heaven's Gate, but what about the people who suffer human spontaneous combustion? That's one of the weirdest things I've always come up with in my life. And if by chance you did raise your something to the point where you actually can exit the matrix, maybe the body just burns itself out while that's happening. So bizarrely, maybe some of those people who have had this experience happen to them left. I don't know.
Yeah. Spontaneous human combustion thing is a whole rabbit trail. I listened to quite a few shows on that, and it's definitely something real. I don't know why science is still denying it. As far as I know, it's something that
Yeah.
happens. You can't explain it. So nope, nope, didn't
It's
happen.
like a deletion from the simulation
Yeah.
in as an analogy. You just kind of
Yeah.
disintegrate and dissolve. So I have a question for you. So you said that in death, that seems to be the quickest way to get to the exit, the real exit. But the way the first 6 chapters of your book describe that is that that's a huge deception as well. As soon as we die, we're enveloped with love and light and comfort and told how special we are. But I haven't read the whole book yet, obviously, but I want to know what you think. How do you get past that? Because that seems much more deceiving than what we're even experiencing here, which is a huge deception as well. But to go through a death, and that's traumatizing in some cases, to then be comforted immediately would that's the easiest way to deceive. You're taking someone out of pain and then covering them in love and telling them it's okay, it's okay. How do you get out of that?
Yeah, really good question. And yeah, you got chapter 4, which in chapter 4 I share a lot of near-death experiences of people who go through what we call the standard near-death experience. That's where they normally see a tunnel of light, white light, feelings of love and gratitude. Dead grandma, Jesus or Buddha will be there to lead them through the tunnel. A life review. Those are some of the standard things that come in. In chapter 9, I talk about some of the non-standard near-death experiences. People who seem to, because remember, the challenge with it, it's always a near-death experience. So it's not actually death, it's near death. And the death experience seems to be much longer. And there are people who've gone beyond the standard experience that tell us a completely different tale. They give us more information on what's possibly really going on there. So what seems to be really going on is, first of all, we've got these supposed beings of light that are there to help us and guide us and love us. If you know how to stare at them and look through them completely, you'll find out that they're not dead grandma and they're not Jesus and they're not Buddha. They're alien, what Gnostics would call archons, the first and cursed creations of the demiurge, who are really in charge of holding on and controlling this realm. They're the ones who are appearing as these other loving creatures for you. And like you say, you're coming through very confused. You're coming through confused. You're given this drug of love, more love than you could ever experience. Boom, and you just feel so wonderful. And you're now you're thrown off. And generally, two of the ways it seems, and I'll get your, I know you asked a question, I will get to it. Um, they seem to focus so much on the life review, and particularly when you go through people who've gone through this after death life review, it's mostly about negative things, all the things that you did that you were bad. And it doesn't matter how wonderful of a life you've lived, these beings will find shit about you. Like guaranteed, they'll find the day that you didn't pick up the neighbor's fallen apple that was in her hand, and they will try to show that this created the mess of her life and caused her to put a gun to her head and kill herself and whatever, and it's all your fault. They will try this kind of stuff on you. So the life review is always designed to try to show you what an awful person you were. And that's why you have to come back. You're not good enough yet. You're not advanced enough. You haven't learned enough about love. So to answer your question, how do we prepare for that? I think there's a couple of ways that we prepare for what's likely going to happen. One is to research it. One is to honestly research the after-death experience and see that a lot of these very nice, which are transformative, the people who go through the standard near-death experience, they come back transformed. They're wonderful people. They're loving. They're the guy or girl you'd love to have at your table for dinner. But did they also get deceived? And that's the question you have to dig into and ask. If what I'm saying is probably true, then it's a couple of things to prepare. One is start recognizing that all of our life, we are giving away our authority to other people, to things outside of ourselves. We're constantly letting other people decide things for us, other things to make choices for us, things outside of ourselves to tell us what to believe. We're constantly praying to something outside of ourselves. I can go in a whole talk later on about prayer and what I've learned about what prayer can really be. But we're praying to things outside of ourselves, and we don't know what it is. We say, I'm praying to this, I'm praying to that, but how do you know? How do you know who it is? And how do you know what that energy is going towards? And yeah, sometimes you get what you want, but how do you know some being isn't playing with you, isn't giving you something here and it's going to get something back over there, just like a drug? So it's about first step is learning how to take our own authority and realize the power we have as a human, not so as a human, but as this divine spark, as the deepest part of what is part of our soul. That has more power than anything in the dream, has more more power than the demiurge, more power than the archons, more power than anything. So first we have to come back, find ways to come back in touch with our own inner power and our own authority and be comfortable being able to say, I know what's really true, and I'm going to be able to follow that because when you cross to the other side, when these beings try to have authority over you and tell you what to do, you have to not give it to them. You have to be able to say, you have no authority over me. This is a big uh, a conversation that happens in one of the Nag Hammadi documents, the Apocalypse of James. It also shows up in the weighing of the heart ceremony in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where there's going to be what they call gatekeepers, and they're going to be asking you question after question after question. And a lot of the answers you have to give is basically, well, you have no authority. You're from this realm. You're from the simulation. I'm not from the simulation. I'm from like the Father. I'm from home. So I'm going there. And that's kind of one of the pieces we have to do. Another that I would say is you need to know your life really, really well because you know you're going to go through this life review. Everyone who dies seems to get it. And if you've got pieces in your past that you don't know about, or places in the past where you still feel guilt or shame or regret, guaranteed they're going to be pulling those up. So don't wait to try to deal with them after you're dead. Deal with them now. Dig into those experiences now while you have this opportunity and clean all that up and feel that you can walk in saying, yeah, I did some stuff. I didn't like, I wished I had done this different. I wished I had done that differently, but I learned a lot from it. I changed, I grew, I transformed. I'm who I am now. I'm okay with how that played out. I learned from it. And because if you don't get through all that, that's another thing you're going to face. So that would be the first couple of things I would say. And then the other would be try to learn as many of the deception tricks as possible. There's a Star Trek Voyager episode that I highly recommend. It's called Coda, and it's Commander Janeway dies or is in the process of dying, and a being who's an alien being who's disguising itself as her father is trying to get her to come into the tunnel of white light to finally end the death struggle. And she keeps refusing him, refusing him, refusing him. Finally, she realizes, oh, you need me to agree. You can't force me into the tunnel. I have to agree to go in the tunnel. And again, this is part of the understanding that bizarrely, we're agreeing to all the garbage that they're tricking us into believing. And if we just don't agree to it, if we say no, I'm not being involved in any of these contracts, any of these negotiations, they're all being signed under deception and fraud. I'm standing in my own power. We at least give ourselves the space to at least make some decisions when we're in the after death realm. And maybe in the after death realm, once you're in that place, you'll say, I want to come back. Okay, I really do. For whatever reason, I don't. I think this is a suffering pit of hell, but maybe you do. Okay. But you want to make that choice from the deepest bit of yourself, not because some being has tricked you into coming back. And then all of a sudden you're back in a new mother's womb and you're going, oh, how did I get tricked in here again? Damn it. So there's my answer for you. But if see where you want to take that from.
I love it. So it's almost like practicing for it, like you were saying, researching it and kind of preparing yourself for it. There's a great book. I think it was called The Lost Art of Resurrection. I read it a couple years ago, and they go into some of the old ancient Egyptian. It's all probably theoretical, but basically doing these rituals to practice the death experience so that you know what to do when you get there. And maybe some of the Cathars and Mayans, maybe they were doing that too, and they were practicing, and then they were able to do it while they were alive, and that's why they all just disappeared. Just ideas, but yeah. What else can you do besides practice for it and research as much as you can? I think
I would agree. Yeah, things
Yeah.
like lucid dreaming. That's a really good thing to partake in, because in lucid dreaming, you're getting used to being in a state in the dream world where you're in a potentially totally different form, but you're staying conscious, out of body experiences where you're not even in a body and you're moving around, and you're getting used to staying aware that normally when we were in a dream, we just follow the dream environment. We're not lucid. We're not aware of what's going on, which we would need to be well in the after death state. There was a book by Douglas Harding, and in the book, he talked about meditation. And he said, if you're meditating to try to be quiet and be happy, you're doing the wrong thing. He said, meditation should be practicing being dead, so that you're using your meditation practice to literally practice death, so that when death comes, you're ready for it. And that's another thing. What I guess that what the Dzogchen Buddhism is doing, Dzogchen Buddhism, which is trying to put you into what they call the clear light, which is really the void. It's the place of nothingness. A lot of people actually, when they die, they don't go directly to this white light. They go to a place that they describe as nothingness, the void, where no time, no space, no, just full but empty, right? That's the clear light of the void. And I think if you have a choice, that's the best place to go to start with, because at least you're not going in the white light tunnel. So you're not coming back for sure. Because once you hit the tunnel, it looks like you're getting reincarnated. Once you go in there, it's pretty hard to get out. So at least if you can be in the void, you're still in the cave, you're still in the matrix, but you're in a finer place of it. And maybe you can think about it. I think that's maybe what the Dzogchen Buddhists are doing. They're trying to get people, while still in a body, so used to being in the void that it's like when they die, it'll just be natural. Their natural instinct is void. So they get into the void and they can at least, okay, what's going on? What do I need to think about? Because like you said, Jen, that for my death experience never actually went into the other world part. All my experience happened before I left my body, you might say. But that's a common thing in the near death experiences. They talk about at the beginning, how confused they are. I don't know what's going on. Where am I? What's happening? And in that confused state, like we all know, that's how cults and the gurus find their people. They find them when they're suffering and confused, and give them the right answer that they want to hear at that time, and boom, they're in. So that's kind of like, I think, what the near death state is doing, just on a bigger scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. As humans, we're so easily programmable, and we crave guidance. I mean, as babies, we were just talking on another show that humans are like the weakest mammals. We come out of the womb crying, screaming, helpless, and can't even walk for a year or a year and a half. And other animals come out and they have to walk within a couple hours, or the parents abandon them. So we need everything done for us, and we're told, do what I tell you to do because I said so, because this is the way it is, and that's how we grow up. Of course, people, as they get older, come out of that mindset and say, no, I'm going to think for myself. I'm going to rebel. I'm going to, everyone's different, but we're kind of trained that way from birth to just follow and listen and depend.
Right. It's another perfect way to set up the trap. You said, how old are your children? Just out of curiosity, I'm going to make a comment. How old are yours?
10 and 16.
Okay, so you've gone through the age when they were 1 and 2, obviously. So I was with a child that was 2 years old, just learning how to speak. I'm saying this because maybe Jen will have a story to tell back of her experiences. And I was watching the parents with this friends of mine, with the child, and the child never spoke of itself directly. It was always in the third person. She would always say, Sally wants a drink. Sally wants to go outside. Sally wants to go to her room. It was never, the Sally thing and who she felt she was were two completely different things. And the parents would, no, you're Sally. You say, I want a drink. Now, Sally wants a drink. No, you're Sally. I want a drink. And I was realizing that the young child is still literally, they're still in this other realm, kind of. They're still there. And they still know that on some level. They know they're not the body. And it's the parents eventually saying, no. And finally, the child says, yeah, I want a drink. And it's kind of like, the minute we've done that, the minute we've identified, I am my physical body, we're in. Did you see something like that when you guys were growing up? I'm just curious if this is universal or if it was just something unique I saw.
I don't know. I don't quite remember. My daughter's so old now. But she did learn to talk very young, and she was very repeating and mimicking. So if I told her to say something, she would just say it. I mean, I haven't. Matt, have you? Your kiddo is, how old's your kiddo?
He's 9. So yeah, I'm in that ballpark, and I don't remember a big, third person phase. It was for the most part, he was me when he came out, it was always I want, I need, or yeah, that kind of. So I think that's pretty unique, Howdy.
I was like, I was amazed that I had the opportunity to watch this experience. It was like, wow. Another one I had similar to that was a mother and her, again, it was a daughter. She's maybe not a little older, 5 or 6. And the daughter was saying, oh, look, it's a blue jay or something, or no, it's whatever bird. And the mother, no, it's this other it's this bird over here. The kid's like, no, it's a whatever. And I'm standing back saying, okay, we don't actually know what the child is perceiving, because of course I know from all my years with the medicine men, with Carlos Castaneda's work, with whatever, I mean, I know that the world is just a perception, and my perception might not necessarily be the same as yours, and we've got a million different things going on here that we're not perceiving at all. What if the child is really seeing something that, like, we can't, and we're actually finding ways to, you know, the invisible friend they have, the whatever, but oh no, you don't have that invisible friend. But we often find out later, when somebody goes through like a shamanic cycle in their lives, that often, if they find their power animal, they'll remember, oh yeah, you used to be around when I was 3 all the time. What happened to you? Well, you stopped believing in me, so I stopped showing up. So
Yeah,
we have
I
these.
wonder, Howdy, what
Yeah,
causes that, right? What takes that out of us? Because we've all had that as a child, right? You're born almost
right.
with that ability to believe in something greater. And then it seems like right around that 3, 4, 5 age, it seems to get worked out of us. And
Yeah. And
and
it's
it, you
and
spend your whole
I'm
life.
not bashing parents in any way, shape, or form, because that's part of how this realm is structured. But it's a lot of this realm is structured in the sense of to create what we call members. Everybody has to see the same thing, think the same thing, see the same reality. And so there's an early time frame where, and it's not so much like it wouldn't be you, Matt, doing that directly. It's the it's the mind that you have, which is frightened that you might look at it and start saying, hey, the way I've been taught and trained when I was a kid might not be true. So that mind, not you, not the Matt that's here, right? The deep self, that the thing that runs our lives that we don't want it to, and we don't realize it. It's saying, I got to make sure I teach my kid to be just like me, so that we're all members together, and we don't have to have any deep questions about anything. So it would be totally interesting to be able to have an opportunity to raise some children again in the ancient way. Another thing I talk about in Falling for Truth, which is something, since we're talking about children and whatnot, that is something I now am so disappointed to have missed in my life, and that is the native process of initiation, the ancient way of going from child to adult, the process of where the girl or the boy would be taken away from the village for a year and be trained by the elders. The boy would go with the men for a full year, and they would learn everything it means to be male and deal with male things, and how. And the girl would go with the woman for a year, and they would be taught everything they need to know in that phase. And when they returned, they would return with such unbelievable power, and also unbelievable connection to the other. The male and the female would have this unbelievable connection, because they were also, like, the boys were learning, well, these are what girls are going to be like. The girls are learning, these are what the boys are going to be like. So when they returned, there was this perfect intermingle, not perfect, but really perfect intermingling of how the society was going to function and structure. And we didn't have this, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I don't know my path, I don't know my calling, how am I going to figure stuff out. This was done in this early stage of our lives. It was and it was helped by the grandfathers and the grandmothers, who had an important role in the society, which was teaching this child how to go. They've lived now 50, 60 years. They know what to share. In our world, the grandmothers and grandfathers get pushed aside, get you in the home as fast as possible. We don't want you talking to anybody. And what a different world we would have if we still had this kind of realization of the importance of moving from child to adult, and actually building adults. When I talk about the average 50-year-old, they're a 10-year-old child who's been living for 40 years. People have never really become an adult. And you can see this because all you've got to do is give them a little pressure, give them a little stress, and you'll see the 8-year-old all of a sudden, the same way they responded to their parents under stress, it'll be right there. There's not too many. When I meet somebody that's under stress and they're still like unbelievably calm and cool and clear, and I'm like, wow, I've got an adult in front of me. I've got an adult, male or female, in front of me. This is so cool. And it's just like, but it's unfortunately so rare.
Well, yeah, and I think the last couple of years have brought that out more than ever. That little girl you were talking about that talked about herself in the third person, I would be really interested to talk to her about any memories she might have, because a lot of that age range from about 2 to 6 seems to be when they remember being someone else, or
Yeah.
I you aren't my mom, this other person's my mom. And a lot of those were verified too. They'd go back and talk to
Yeah.
not verified, but that some stuff actually checked out.
Oh
And
yeah,
there's no way,
verified. Verified.
yeah, there's no way this 4-year-old is knowing that person's name on the other side of the world. Or,
No,
there's some
what was that
crazy
story we just
stories.
heard about the little boy who described his wife and he played guitar or something like that? I don't know
Yeah,
who
that's
that
probably
was.
from me. You're probably listening to that
Yeah.
on Higher Side Chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I listened to a couple of your interviews recently, so it was probably on one of them. But yeah,
One of them, yeah.
what was that story? Can you repeat it?
Yeah, this is why it's for this reason that I've come to say that reincarnation is almost 99% reality now. I said no to it for a long time. But there's just too many verifiable stories, particularly from young children. There's a couple of famous ones. One famous one was a kid who was always playing with warplanes, was always whatever, and when war things would come on, documentaries would come on, he would he would correct the people in the documentaries. No, that's not that kind of plane. It's this kind of plane. And when the parents would go check it out, it's like he's right every time. And when they started talking to him about it, he actually had, no, I'm this guy. I died on this particular ship on this attack on, I think it was Iwo Jima and whatever. And when they started tracking it back and they found who this person was, and they brought photographs of him, and he started explaining who all the people were in the photographs. And then when they checked it out, they were all right. They took the kid, I guess, eventually to meet some of the surviving members of this aircraft carrier, and he knew stuff about them. There's no way that he could know. And then the other story that Jen told was the story of a child who, again, 4 years old or something, was describing, this is who I was in the last life. This is where I live. This is my wife. Why am I here? I don't want to live here anymore. I want to get back to her. And they finally said, they found out that there was a woman who lived in that city with that particular name. So they said, okay, to shut our kid up, finally, we're going to go to that city and we're going to let them meet, and we'll get this out of his system. So they brought him over to the house, and the first thing he's like, "Where's my guitar?" What do you mean? Well, where's my guitar? Well, it's in the back room. I don't have it out anymore. Well, let me see it. And he brings it out and he starts playing the guitar. And the parents are like, how does he know how to play the guitar? And they'd be like, what about my books? Do you still have this book and this book? No, I gave that one away to the market. Well, but I still have this one. Yeah, I have this one. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is the one I still have my notes in. And they go through and they'd be like, and the parents are like, what the hell's going on? And they finally started, after a few instances like this, the parents themselves acknowledged, this is the reincarnated husband of this wife. We can't explain it. And by the time the kid turned, they let them spend time together over the course of years. But once he turned 18, the parents said, go ahead. And he moved in with her in New York, and they lived the rest of their life together. The parents eventually just realized he is still in that state. He is still that person. He has not left and become the new person. So there are so many of these verifiable experiences out there that, to me, it's almost guaranteed. So that leads us to the problem with the reincarnation, because people will generally give you an answer of, oh, reincarnation is good because we're coming back here to learn. We're coming back here to gain more experiences, to perfect ourselves. Here's the problem. The problem is, it almost seems guaranteed that when we come here, we get what's known as the memory wipe. And the memory wipe is the most dangerous thing possible, because there's no way this can be a place of learning if you can't remember your past lives. I give the example in my book. If I touch a piece of stinging nettle and I burn my fingers, I know, put some gloves on, I'll pick the stinging nettle and I can have some tea. if in the next life I don't remember that and I have to keep touching the stinging nettle every single time, that's insanity. I don't go to grade 4 and forget everything I've learned in grade 1 to 3 and have to start all over again. An important part of learning is seeing what you've experienced, what you've gone through, mistakes you've made, and being able to correct and course forward. If we were remembering our past lives, two things would be happening. One, we should be unbelievably aware and brilliant because there's so many things we would know. But two, more importantly, and this is why it doesn't happen, we would be like the robots in Westworld. That's a story of being memory wiped. Those robots die, they get taken back to the main control, they get cleaned up, they get patched up, and they get memory wiped. So they can get sent back and not remember how many times they've been raped, how many times they've been killed, how many times they've been treated like garbage, because if they did, and that's really what Westworld is. Westworld is the story of Dolores and Maeve remembering their previous lives, remembering their previous incarnations, remembering all the garbage that's happened to them and saying, I'm getting the hell out of Westworld. And this wouldn't work. This reincarnation trap cannot work if we remembered all of our past lives. It seems like some of them slip through. We don't fully get always the forgetfulness. And like we say, young kids still remember pieces of them and parts of them, but if we could remember all the suffering we've gone through, somebody said, well, my life isn't so bad, actually. It's okay. I've got some problems, but it's not too bad. Yeah, but you don't remember the one you just had. And the one you just had might have been truly living hell. And you don't know what the next one that's possibly being set up for. This could be way worse than anything you've ever seen yet, because think of the billions of people right now, today, on this planet who are living in nightmarish hell day after day after day. That could be you next. So for me, having come to this understanding, I see I've become almost like a Gnostic or a Cathar or one of these ancient civilization members. It's just, okay, I've come to this reality. I now know what it is. I'm here to be used as food for basically the system to keep running itself. That's all I'm really here as a body for. I'm not here to grow. I'm not here to learn, other than learn the steps I need to take to go home. Just like I've been at a party with some friends for all night long. We've been drinking. It was fun for a while, but now it's 3 a.m. and people are puking on the ground and they're just walking around. They're slobs now and stay, have one more drink. And I'm like, guys, this is no fun anymore. So I'm going home. That's how I feel about this realm now. I'm going home. And if my books can get some ideas to help others maybe think about the same possibilities, again, it's just a thesis. It's just what I've come to see. I'm still learning. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how many answers I really do have, but I know a lot of people have kind of been comforted hearing my talks and the things I'm doing, because now they don't feel crazy anymore. Where everyone else thinks you must be nuts to think like this, and now here's somebody else coming out who I seem relatively normal, saying something similar, and they can go, okay, it's okay to think like this. It's okay to ask these questions, and I think that's all I'm trying to say. If you're in a similar ballpark as me, it's okay to think about this stuff and come to your own answers, and more importantly, find your own power, find your own strength to reach the answer that's yours. You don't want my answer or anyone else's answer. You want your answer. That's the only one that matters.
Yeah, and I don't think, like you said at the beginning, it's going to come off as doom and gloom. I don't really see it like that, because if what you're saying were to be true, then it's the most positive, awesome thing ever. If you're figuring out what the real point is to exit the cave, find the door. So, yeah, like you said, I don't know how many times I've been recycled either, but every time you show up, it's like,
Yeah.
damn it, really? Again? Fuck.
I can see what Howdie's saying, though. So I will say, you, Joe, already are of the mindset that you're not a fan of this realm.
Yeah.
I know that about you. So I know that you're going to relate to Howdie's work and say, okay, this is totally understandable. Not necessarily saying, okay, I'm taking this as hard, solid fact. It's just research. It's an idea. It's excellent to listen to. But someone from a different mindset might say, if they're very, very married to the idea of, reincarnation's great. I mean, I was a little bit like that. I was a little like, when I first heard your work, I was like, ooh, it just gave me a negative feeling at first. But I was like, nope, I'm going to let it go. I had just read the book Many Lives, Many Masters, which presents a very different idea of it's the opposite idea of what you're saying. So what I did was I reanalyzed that book after reading the first 6 chapters of your book and listening to several of your interviews, and I reanalyzed that book with a different lens. And it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. It's not negative. I don't think it's negative. I don't know what is real or what is true, but I think if people listen to what you're saying with a very open mind, it will not come off as negative, but they have to open their mind to it and let go of preconceived notions and ideas they may have
Right.
had.
But the challenge that will come to an average person and through me through the course of my life, I've had to go through these stages myself is two things. One is there's always something out there that's going to save me. You know, it could be a religious figure, it could be my mom, it could be Donald Trump, it could be whoever, someone or something is going to fix everything for me, and we're just waiting for them. That's the famous "Waiting for Godot" Samuel Beckett play, right? The two people are on stage, and the whole play is they're just waiting for Godot, and Godot never comes. That's the general truth of a savior. The savior is always in the future; it's never here right now, right? So that's the first one. You have to let go and realize you're your savior. The savior you're looking for is right here. I can save myself. And we can talk about prayer next when we get to that. And the other side of that is this idea of once someone starts to see there's something wrong with this realm, because that's one of the first steps into this. Someone says there's something wrong here. And that's happened to way more people in the last 2 years than we can imagine. Like with this level of insanity worldwide, more people had to start saying, there's something wrong with this place. And the point is, there's always been something wrong with this place. It's just the degree of the insanity is getting bigger. But generally, the natural first or the first feeling once you see that is, I've got to fix it. There's something wrong with this place, and I'm going to fix it. And that's the trap. That's another trap. People have been trying for thousands of years potentially to fix this place. And we just keep going through reset after reset, destruction after destruction. Once we see that the realm is possibly set up to be a particular way, and we can't change it. You can't change a video game character can't change the video game. But potentially they might be able to change their own experience in the video game. They might be able to change the experience of some people with them and create a small community and have strength and have and grow together, and then potentially put their energy into the best place that they possibly can. So to me, that also, I see that as the second part of it is once you try to fix the world, once you try to save the world, and so many people get caught in that, that can just eat up 10 or 15 years of your life. And then all of a sudden you're standing back there and saying, well, what do I do now? So there's some people that'll be in that point too. You tried to save the world for 15 years and here we are. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
can you save yourself? Can you save yourself? That's, and so I'll share my stuff about prayer, because I think you guys might really enjoy this part, because it's one of the chapters they didn't get to read. So I've been having this long discussion with many people about this idea, and like I say, I learned a lot of medicine stuff. I learned how Native Indians pray, or I thought I learned how they prayed, which was more about thank you than it is about asking for things. But there's still like, even in there's a great spirit, there's a power animal, it's something outside of themselves that was still going on. So it's like I started thinking, well, why don't we just pray to ourselves? What's wrong with praying to our deepest, truest self? So I was on the phone with a medicine man friend that I know, who lives in France now, and I was telling him this, and he said, "Oh, I got a story for you." He said about 20 years ago there was a drought in New Mexico or Arizona or something, and it hadn't rained for months, and they tried local medicine men had tried to get it to rain, they tried to, they did ceremonies for rain, and nothing happened. So they brought another medicine man in from the north. He did his ceremony, and it rained that night. And they finally asked him, "Why did your ceremony work when the others didn't?" And his answer was, "Oh, the other medicine people, they were praying for rain. So when you pray for something, it's not here. I just prayed rain." And when I took that in, I said back to Jerry, I said, so actually what he did is he became rain. So it wasn't medicine man praying for rain, it was rain praying for rain. So the only thing that existed was rain. So the only thing that had to happen was rain. And it was like, oh, that's it. There's the secret. If you've become what you're already praying for, how can it not be in existence? It would have to be that that's it's standard self-help stuff, change yourself before you change the world. But now I see it when if you can actually take that to a true level. And I did that with my blueberry picking in the summer. I pick a lot of blueberries and store them in my freezer all winter. And normally I would go and I'd follow how I'd been taught by my native elders, which is to leave a prayer and leave a gift to the nature and thank the area, thank the blueberries. But then after my talk with Jerry, I said, but this time I'm going to be a blueberry first. So I took time to become a blueberry, and then I gave my prayer blueberry to blueberry. When I went into the forest, it would have been impossible to pick all the blueberries that were there. They were everywhere. And I'm seeing, yeah. So it's like there's all of these little tricks that are potentially in our experience, and similar to kind of what Jen had been saying a little while back, and what Matt had been saying, all of these things get taken out of our world, get taken out of our existence. As we grow up, more and more of these things are pulled away, and we're given these other tools that don't really work. They work a little bit, but they don't really work like the real tools we could have. And if we, again, start from scratch again, wow, the stuff that we can again accomplish here, if we're not fixing everything, if we're fixing, and not fixing, and I hate that word, but transforming here and transforming those around us and those who connect with us, there's a lot that can happen in smaller scale.
Yeah, the funny thing about that method of praying is, especially in the westernized Christian nations, that's an absolute blasphemous heresy to pray to yourself. I mean, that's on the level of Satan trying to become God. You're not God's, God is God. But I love what you said earlier too, is when you're praying, how do you know it's going where you want it to go? And I guess the counter argument would be it's because it's intention based. But if your mind can't conceive of what God is, then how do you know you're sending your prayer to that God if you can't even wrap your mind around it?
Or even if you know where you're sending it to, how do you know that thing is benevolent and has your best?
And that was always my biggest fear, Jen, and why I didn't pray for the longest time, because I was afraid it was going to get intercepted by the wrong team and they were going to take it and use it for ill will, and I was like, because I don't know who I'm, really directing it. I know who I want it to go to, but I don't know how to get it there.
Yep. That's another good question. And so it's not that I would necessarily pay people don't have those prayers. It's, can you treat it like a scientific experiment and is there a way to test? Can you test who or what you're dealing with? Can you find ways to actually truly figure out? Because what we've just been told, these beings are very good at making themselves appear to be whatever you want them to be. This happens to me a lot in my dreams, and I know others will say this. That our dream time is another time we get manipulated quite a lot. So many stories, of course, about dreams you can talk about, but there's so many times where somebody in my dream who I've been close to in my life, they're in the dream. I interact with them in some usually strange way. I get up the next day and I am totally not right. I'm literally not functioning in a really good way. There's something, and I have to go through like a cleansing procedure just to be like awake again. And I started to realize, oh, that wasn't them in the dream. That was some like demonic being pretending to be them. And I fell right for it. I followed along. And of course, the more attached we are to a form of somebody in this realm, the easier a being who is able to, in a sense, read our thought patterns and know what we're all about can pretend to be that thing, and of course draw us right in. And the more we trust the person in our life, the more we would automatically, especially in the dream state where we don't know what's really going, we'll trust that, oh, they're giving us something good, something that's right. And again, we don't know. All of this stuff has to be, maybe I've had the opposite. I've had experiences where beings or dead people or whatever have given me the most incredible wisdom, but afterwards I never felt heavy and exhausted and tired and feeling totally out to lunch, as happens sometimes after this happens in my dream. So it's just a reminder how often we can be potentially manipulated by these beings, and they don't just trick us, they trick us in many cases by showing us what we hope to see, appearing as we hope something would appear, and then that's the easiest way for us to be deceived. So the more we can stay aware, and the more we can just ask questions, and the more we can say, maybe that's who I'm talking to, maybe it's not, I don't know. I'm going to give this more time, and I'm going to see if I can get a clear answer. Not only are we understanding the situation, we're again gaining more and more of our own power, more and more of our own authority. And
Yeah,
yeah,
even the
I
Bible
think
says
that's
to test the spirits. So that's implying that there's good ones and bad ones and probably everything in between. So
yep.
that's why I don't believe or not that I don't believe, but whenever somebody has like a download or an alien experience where they gave them all this information, it's like you don't know that's who they were saying they were from the Pleiades or whatever. Like you don't know that's where they're from. They call that the same thing we call it. That's amazing. They're from Venus, huh? So
Yeah.
just
And but
it's
again, you
hard
can
to,
see that we like we said earlier, we so want to believe, we so want to trust in authority, we feel so weak. We come, like Jen said, we come in here so weak as children that we beg for someone or something out there to direct us and guide us and give us until we can get to the point where we feel we know where we're going, and somehow we lose this natural, yeah, but I should have all that inside of myself. All that should be here. I don't, I only need some pointers from those outside. I don't need to be told anything. And so you can see how easy it is if that hasn't been taken away. If you haven't overcome that, you're easy to be tricked.
yeah. And like we said, the last couple years, the biggest example of that, everyone's very easily tricked because they just want somebody else to tell them what to do, how to live their life, what they should pray to, and without even looking at this perspective you're
Yeah.
presenting today.
Okay, Joe. So here's a question since you're going down that particular road. So I'll ask all of you guys the same question. You might have heard this in one of my other podcasts, but because you've talked about, oh, how many people have, been fallen for things, how many people have been, we call it downloaded or whatever. But here's the question. Out of the out of a percentage of 100 of the human population, what percentage of the human population now do you think are actually human? What percentage of the population do you think are robots? And I don't mean like those who are just following, uh, you know, uh, sort of a standards. I mean, literally robots, not human at all. They're just fake non-player characters to make the world look populated. What would be your percentages? Yep, all three. I'm curious.
Oh, that's funny. We've been talking about this lately.
I know.
I don't know the percentage, but when I first heard about the NPC theory, I remember I was like, "Oh, that's just some selfish person saying that, dumb people are NPCs." But then I kept looking into it because I didn't want to just think that it was, a stupid theory because it's very interesting. And the more I looked into it, the more I think that NPCs are a thing, but they're not just the dumb people who are like the plebs of
No,
the world, just going and eating McDonald's
right.
every day. No, they could be people who are major leaders who guide the
The
direction of
royals,
Mm,
our world.
Joe
the
Biden.
Yeah,
queen.
but I mean, it's just like in
right.
a video
Could be
game,
anybody.
keep going with that example, like the king in the
Yeah.
castle or the main boss bad guy. Those are all NPCs, but they're very important.
Right.
You have to pass through them to level up in the game per se. So
Yeah.
I don't know the percentage, but I know they're there. I do feel that.
All
Mm.
celebrities, probably most of them, except Jim Carrey. He seems like he's not.
I don't know if all celebrities are. I think a lot of the higher ups in the celebrity world are to guide the celebrities so that they can then influence people.
Mm.
But I don't know. Maybe some celebrities are too.
I'd say as far as a percentage, though, I'd say
Maybe like 50?
60. 60. It seems like there's more and more every day, though. Every time I drive down the freeway, I'm like, it might be 80%. It might be 90.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I at first I was like, you know what? It's probably like 25, 30%. But then when you said, Joe, if you go out there and you actually participate in their world, that it goes up. And I would say it's probably 65. I would say it's probably 2 out of 3 people nowadays are, and by NPC, I think robot Howdie, I would say that's probably down about 10, 15%. But I think when we talk NPC, I'm talking about a human being that doesn't have a soul. I think that's a real high number. And I think that's where we're in that 2/3 of people out here.
Or like a biological
Mm.
robot,
Mm.
like the Greys.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah,
think,
I know.
Howdy?
Like the early part of my work, well, I guess of my, I don't want to call it research, but when I was in my more obsessed, um, period of exercises, sort of before 2005, when I was attempting to test reality. That was my whole life, was daily exercises to prove anything about the texture or the solidity of reality. And in the course of that, I began to come across, yeah, humans that were not humans, but obviously spirit beings that were here to provide some sort of message or guidance or whatever. And I could start to find those. And I started to notice there was this other that I'm calling a robot. And I began to notice them more because if I had conversations with them, they had a very tight box of answers that they would give it. You could move to other subjects, but the answers in those subjects would still like be the same. They didn't have um, many actual talking points of any depth. Things were very, and I don't want to make it sound, oh, it's simplistic, because like you say, like Jen said, they could be very higher up. They could have like, they could be running a company, they could be running a business, they're very successful. But when you actually start asking them about anything, the conversation was like literally B7, C8, answer G19. It was literally like that. And if you talk to them enough, you would get the similar answers to different things, just rotating like a small wheel. So
Algorithm.
I'm thinking it might be 90% non-player characters, maybe
Wow.
95.
And that's assuming, we've talked about this a lot recently, that's assuming that the numbers we're given for the world's population is actually true.
Yeah.
That would be a fuck ton of NPCs or robots. But what do you think about that? About the actual number of the world's population? I think it's skewed a bit by social media, especially Twitter. But the actual number of, we'll call them meat suits on the planet.
What are we at? About 8 billion now, Joe?
That's what they say. Yeah.
Around there?
That's what they say. Um, I know somebody did an experiment once, or did a diagram, that if you took supposedly 8 billion people and you gave every single one of them, I can't remember if it was like 100 square meters of land, or I don't know, and it all fit into like Texas and Louisiana, like the whole world's population would literally, with an okay little plot of land, they would all fit into
Like
like,
an acre of
2
peace
US
or
states or
something.
something.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
remember what it was. So it's also kind of making you kind of wonder, yeah, I have no idea what the population is. um, we're back to these simulation issues, and we're back to the story of like how much of the world is really here. I think that's what that Zen cone is. If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And people are missing the point. They say, well, sound is this, and this is how sound is created. And it's like, but wait a minute. If there's no one there existing to experience it, does it exist at all? Can there have been a tree, and can there have been anything fallen? It's like that quantum physics, right? Like there's stuff behind me here that, according to quantum physics, doesn't exist because I'm not paying attention to it. It only exists now because I'll turn around and now my wood pile is there. It manifested itself. And that's a story that happened to me again when I was doing this intense period, and I almost went crazy in the middle of it because of what was happening. I got up to pee at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I noticed a floating barcode, IPC barcode above the toilet, just floating there. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, but barcodes don't float. They're usually attached to something. And as soon as I said that, a bottle of cleaner formed around it, and then some other cleaners formed. And I just went, oh shit. And I started looking around the room, and it was literally like the room started manifesting itself. And I was realizing, okay, did I at that moment of time, because I had so little mental energy, I created the floor I needed to walk on and the toilet I needed to pee in because that's what was required in that state, and everything else literally wasn't in existence until I started questioning the reality, and it started literally forming in front of me to make what I was expecting to find. And I started doing experiments like that in my day-to-day world and found out that's actually true, that the world is actually formulating because we're making it. I don't say we're creating it. That's not the right word. We're making it. We're making it manifest to us, or we're making our perception able to perceive certain worlds. And if we learn how to shut that off, we actually shut off reality. It's actually not here.
Like
And that was
real time
freaky for a while.
rendering. Got some GPU laggage. That's a
Yeah.
wild story, man. Well, you guys have anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here? That was a great talk, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Matt, you got anything you want to go to, or
No,
because I know you're
well,
the
one
World's
thing
Fair
I'm
guy and
interested
stuff, so
in.
I don't know if there's something you wanted to bring up and ask about those, or an area of like your research we can get while you're here. You know, if you got something that you really wanted to ask, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask about is I've heard you talk about the energies of a lot of the places you visited, whether it's the pyramids, Stonehenge,
Mhm.
um, Ebury,
Yep.
all these different. Have you ever been to any star forts? And or have you
Yes.
seen any of them, and the energy around them? Because that's one of the anomalies that I'm finding in this area is the star forts, because
Yeah.
they're all over the realm, and they seem to be more than just a simple defensive position as they would be,
Yeah, did you see
told
that
in the
video
narrative.
that guy did? There was a video about a year ago. Some guy did about a star fort in northern Manitoba, like Fort Churchill or something. This literally this star fort in the middle of nowhere that was supposed to be garrisoned by like, I don't know, like 10 British soldiers or something. And the French and the whatever, they came with hundreds of and they couldn't take the thing. They couldn't capture it. And there's no damage to it even. It's like pristine, it's perfect. And there's no explanation as to how this thing could have ever survived all the attacks that it's supposed to have had on it. So yeah, I've been to a few star forts, nothing that I would classify as like a star fort that is, yeah, something, yeah, there it is. Churchill, Manitoba, this thing right here. This was supposed to, I don't know, have like 3 or 4 soldiers. I don't know what they said it had, attacked by hundreds, and they could never attack it. And as you can see, never shows any damage. It's an amazing video. This guy walked around it. He was actually there, and they videotaped different parts of trying to explain what it's doing. Um, I know I went to a lot of them as a kid. I was traveling around the US a lot to look at like Fort McHenry. I think that was a star fort. Some of these ones like not Michilimackinac, but Fort Mackinac, I think was a star fort. So all of these things are star forts. Um, the ones I've been to though have been the energy's been okay at them. I can't say they've been, but again, the challenge is we know they're connected to other things. So like Trondheim is the closest city I have with a star fort. The main cathedral, the Nidaros Cathedral, the cathedral's got a good energy, but there's one particular part of the cathedral that's built to it in perfect Fibonacci sequence. So that place has a giant energy. And I don't doubt if that and some other things were running, the star fort would be running stronger as well. So for me at this point, I found the star forts to be almost like they're turned off. But I would say the best place to test would be Palma Nova, Italy, right?
Yeah.
That one that's like star fort on top of a star fort on top of a star fort, where the whole city is like star forts. That's the city I would use as my test point to say, what do I think this is doing, and what do I think different points energetically? And what I would want to do if I was studying that, the same as if I was now going back to the cathedrals again in Italy, if I ever get there again, would be getting the rose patterns on the windows, the rose petal patterns on the stained glass windows, and have got the cymatic wave pattern first to match what is the cymatic wave pattern. Same thing. What is the star forts snowflake pattern? What is its cymatic pattern? What is the wave it's supposed to be creating? So can I find a way to feel or test that exact particular energetic wave? That's how I would know if it's working or not, right?
Yeah,
Um,
because that's one of the
uh,
things I was looking at, was to see if, they're charged by ley lines. Is it an ethereal charge? Is it more of a telluric charge? Is it under the ground? Is it a combination?
mm.
And but like you said, most of them at this point in time have been, you know, unplugged, so to speak. They're
Unplugged.
not
Yeah, like
active.
another example would be Avebury. Like for example, I talked about many things how Stonehenge is dead, but Avebury in England is still on. And
Mhm.
Avebury is it's more than just the stone circle. It's like a giant not wall, uh, roadway of stones that wind in a giant serpent all along the pathway, very similar to the way the Serpent Mound in Ohio is set up. So that's Avebury, and it just in the middle of it is this giant stone circle. But I've walked the whole thing. I walked the entire serpent, and the energy keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger as you walk. But if I went like outside of Avebury, yeah, there you go. Um, yeah, you can see sort of like the stone walkway there, and then you can see you're seeing the inner circle of where the main stones are, which are just giant. They're just massive stones. Um, if I went outside of the walkway of the road, the energy was there, but not so strong. when I was in the walkway, it was strong. When I got to the center of Avebury, I couldn't actually stand still. If I kept my feet on the ground, the fire in my legs was so strong, I thought I was going to, I was going to burn up. I thought I would catch on fire. And so I had to always keep moving. And I normally like to sit with stones and, just spend time. And I couldn't. In Avebury, I thought if I sit down, I'm going to catch on fire. That's how much energy it had. So my feeling is it's somehow, I feel that the stones are in a way like acupuncture needles on the human body. So they're following the meridians of the earth. So just the way someone in China can put a needle here and that can control your triple warmer, which is control your heat levels and your stress level and whatever. Well, same thing. They're putting the stones in exact places in the Earth's energy grid that are affecting how that works. So yeah, if you can follow the energy grid, I'll give you another great one. When I used to take people to stone circles here in Norway years ago, the population here kind of know nothing about them, don't even know they have them, or they think they're just Viking burial sites. They had no idea. They go to England to see stone circles, right? So I started taking Norwegians to their own stone circles and having all sorts of experiences and healings taking place. One guy showed up there one time, and he was tracking ancient church, the old original, they're called stavkirkas, the original churches here in Norway. And he found that if you place them all, they all fit on lines that all ran to this one giant cathedral in Trondheim. Every single of the old churches in the whole country all match on these perfect lines. And then when he started coming to the stone circles, I said, okay, let's start plotting all these stone circles. They fit on all the lines. Not one of the stone circles was anywhere off any of these giant lines. So for me, if you could find the main ley lines in any star fort area you're looking at, I almost guarantee they would run through the star fort. And then you would find out, by extending the lines, what other ancient sites do they fall on top of? What other star forts do they connect? And you would then start maybe beginning to almost grasp what would be that energy line's energy, perhaps? What could you use that one for as compared to that one? Because that's something I found about stone circles. You can do completely different things in different circles. They all have energy. They all can heal. They all can give you information. But depending on what you want or need, there's different. I would send somebody to a different circle for a different purpose. And I would almost same thing, Star Fort, same thing for the building, same thing for the cathedrals. They do something slightly different energetically. And if you know combination of what that structure does and what you're going to for, you'd have a better combination of connecting with that energy.
Damn, that's interesting stuff. We could do a whole show just on that.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother show between ley lines and cathedrals. And I mean, there's a book out there just on the French cathedrals and the ley lines, and how there is a design to the way that the cathedrals are laid out so that they work together in a network. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, like you go to a place like Chartres where you've also got the labyrinth in the middle.
Mhm.
It's a place that's just like energetically. Well, it's Chartres is probably the most energetic place outside of Egypt or Mexico I've ever been.
I'm with you, Howdie. I think France is one of those spots that is very, very significant in this realm, at least. I think energetically, I think from the historic perspective, I think there's something about that area that is very, very powerful.
What I'm going to do is after we're done with the video, I'm going to make sure that Joe, whatever, gets the access to the complete book, so you can have the whole 15 chapters. Because then I think you'd really like to read my chapter 14 on the Cathars, and particularly some of my stuff on why I'm starting to think that the New Testament might be a hidden code to explain that this story took place in southern France, and why that would explain then what the Knights Templar really were, what the Cathars really were, why the Church of Rome needed to kill off all of these groups who might have had the exact direct connect. And if the timeline is wrong, if the Jesus story, let's say, takes place 1,000 years ago, not 2,000 years ago, like we've been told, if we change the time frame, you're actually would be killing off literally the first descendants of the original disciples. It would make sense why you needed to kill this group off. It's an interesting theory, and there's lots of sort of what you might call circumstantial evidence that could make that as an indication. So I'll make sure you got that and you can look into that yourself and see if that becomes another, like I know, Matt, you need another area of study to go into, but we'll just throw that on to you.
Oh, but that's That's so fascinating, though, Howdy. I mean, just thinking about
Because to
that.
me, if that was true, and again, it's an if,
Yeah.
boy, that explains a whole lot of other hanging historical stories that don't make any sense. All of a sudden, things start to make sense. And someone might say, "Well, you're destroying the Christian faith." Well, no, actually, I'm not. I'm
No, you're
actually
telling
maybe
the
showing
truth.
you that there's been a deception in it, and there's actually an even deeper truth, and actually even more powerful truth. And literally, if you take a pilgrimage, you could go maybe find the real place, not the not a place that's been pretend place. You could find the actual energy, because so much in the medieval times, the people of southern France called all of their mountains and their cities by biblical names. They
Yep.
were there was a Mount Tabor. There was a place where the Pentecost really happened. There was they don't the medieval French believed there were specific places, and it might be not just wishful thinking. They might have still had the memories of something that is really there. And like I say, man, that would explain a lot of the history
And
of France.
and it would make sense too, Howdy, because what have we done? We've been led astray by like Dan Brown and the Da Vinci
Yep.
Code and those books that,
Yep.
it's just propaganda out there that they do to sell things. But in reality, if this was a real story around that, it would definitely make
Yeah, with a
sense.
little bit of truth, right? With a little bit of truth thrown in there so that there's enough that people can say, "Oh yeah, but I think that's true." And
Yep.
then you concoct something else around it. Like, because when you're talking about Dan Brown, that came out of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, right? Which was written by Henry Lincoln and a few other guys. Lincoln's a strange story in himself. He's a really his story is strange. But just as he was getting ready to do a giant expose on the landscape, on the geometry of the southern France landscape, and how many literally measurements and geometric figures and pentagrams and whatever fit on the landscape, these two other guys show up and convince him, "Now let's write a book about the bloodline of Jesus. Let's write a book about Jesus having kids, and that's what this is all about." And all of a sudden, that's where the focus went. And it took 10 or 15 years before Lincoln started writing again about all of this, all the geometrical stuff, all the unbelievable mathematics of the landscape. But by then, no one could hear that. They could only hear what had been in this controversial book. And it's almost like, yeah, like you say, it was set up to give a little truth and then a giant turn to get people to say, "Only look here. Focus on this. Disprove this if you want, but don't go look for the real truth over here." And that's kind of where that got me that's kind of been my whole life, guys. It's kind of been like I bump into stuff in my life and then something just goes, "There's something here. I don't know what it is, but whatever's being presented to me, the narrative is wrong somehow, but I don't know what's right, but I can't not look into it. I have to look into it." And I've lived a difficult life. I've lived a life that I gave up a lot of things in my life in order to do a lot of this research. And for a lot of my life, to be honest, I felt like maybe I wasted my time. You know, I'm no one buys my books. No one listens to anything I might have to say. Maybe I just made a mistake. I put all this time in, and I could have bought a nice car. I could have bought a nice house. I could have whatever. And then all of a sudden, during this crazy 2-year insanity, some switch changed in my life, and all of a sudden my YouTube channel started. People started buying the books, wanting to have interviews like this, and all of a sudden I now feel like all of this time and effort, all the work I've done, there's a value in it now for other people. And I've learned over the last 20 years how to present things better, how to I had a bit of an arrogant edge to me 15 years ago. I thought I knew everything. I thought I got all the answers. And it's taken a lot of time to start being able to realize maybe I've got a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And I need to share that because others have a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And the only way we'd ever learn everything is everybody takes their piece, puts it together, acknowledges other people's work, acknowledges their own, and maybe that's how we find stuff. So it's been a long journey, but I'm thankful now for it. But it hasn't always been easy to get to this point. And the second thing I'd like to say is that we've talked about a lot of stuff from the standpoint of exiting the matrix and getting out of here, and stuff about being in the cave, handling being in the cave. And to me, both are important. To me, finding what you would call truth or your true self or your totality or leaving the matrix, that's important. But it's also equally important to not deny this realm, right? Which is called spiritual bypassing, is to pretend this is not important, or pretend nothing matters here, or that there aren't ways that you can be of service and help others. And that's one of the most important things that I think of learning what you might call skills or tools or whatever. It's not so much to make yourself important or to give yourself power. It's what's another thing I can find that can be helpful to other people? What's another skill I can learn and use that is being of service? And I think if you're doing both, you have the I'm going to be in the realm and I'm going to try to be of service and be useful, but I'm going to be also selfish and realize, but I'm going for truth. I'm going to find out whatever the hell's going on here. I want to know that. And if you find this nice balance, like everything, walk in the middle path between everything, then I think you've got a really good chance of doing something that no matter what, when you finally leave and pass away from this realm, you can say, well, maybe I didn't find out everything, but I did okay. I used my time well.
Yeah. Well
Well,
said.
I wanna
Matt,
personally
you
thank
add
you,
to that?
Howdie, because I wouldn't be doing this right now if and wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for your work, because it reignited a passion in me. And like you said though, this stuff isn't easy. Putting your work out there and putting yourself out there is not easy. But at the same time, if you go into it with the understanding that if we can help just a few people, right? If you can, and I went into it, I created my podcast, and my mission statement was, if I can get one person to think a little differently or just question something, I've done my job. And then anything after that was gravy. And now, I got almost 100 episodes under, and there's people that say thank you, and there's people that are like, yeah, it's made a difference. And it's like, okay, well, monetarily it may not be what it is, but that's not what it was meant to be, right? And that's what I get out of this is in our matrix world, everything that is valuable, right, is supposed to have some tangible dollar value to it. When in reality, I feel like what you're saying right there, and that whole idea of spreading, knowledge, spreading love, spreading, community and spirituality togetherness, I should say, is what it's all about. And I do think, your work is important. I think what Joe and Jen does is important. And, I'll even admit, I think what I do now is a little bit important, because it does have a positive impact on other people's lives. And in this day and age when things are, not the best, things are a little wild and chaotic, and you need things like this. So from me to you, Howdie, thank you, sir. I appreciate your work, and it has made a difference in my life.
Great. Well, and maybe sometime coming up, you and I can get together then, and we'll talk on your channel, and we can go into something in depth with the fairs if you
Oh,
want.
I'd love to.
Play around. Sure.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
how do you tell everyone where they can find your work and your books?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have it up on
So,
the screen.
so actually, so people know my name. If you're Google searching me, it ends with an I, not a Y. I'm just seeing it scrolling across the screen. So that would make
Oh,
it easier. Howdy Mickoski with an I. I just caught that now.
Yo.
man.
That's fine. Oh, he's gonna. Okay, so we'll wait to do the official. Yeah, you can go to it. That's my terrible named website, EgyptianWisdomRevealed.com, with all the dashes in there. And right now, my new book, Exit the Cave, is available as a PDF file. It's by donation, and you can get it as a PDF or an ebook. It should be out as a print book in the next 5 to 6 days. So I finally got it ready for the print version. So the print version should be out, and the audio version of it will be out in about a month, maybe. I'm just starting to read it now. If you go to Howdy Mickoski Talks, you can catch up on some of the videos and things I'm talking about. You'll also updates on what's going on. If you checked my name on Amazon, you could see the other books, or you could find them on my website as interesting. Of course, you don't have to buy the books from Amazon. You can buy them from wherever you want to buy them. It's just a standard place to go and check them out. And yeah, you kind of go to those places, and I don't know what to say. I got the book out as a PDF. Okay, this is gonna be heavy to end this with, but I got the book out as a PDF file because I didn't want to wait for the book for it to come out as a book, because I didn't know how long we all have. And this is we all have to really take this seriously. This realm could at any time just switch over into pure chaos. And it is potentially going in that direction. if there's something that's important to you, whether it's a book, whether it's a podcast, whether it's an audio thing you want to hear, something that you think is you want to have this for a long time in your life, get it now. Don't think it's still going to be available in 6 months. Make sure that you have whatever book or whatever, get it now for yourself. Hopefully it's still there in 6 months, but don't think it will be. On the other side of that, and that's why I really want, and that's why I made sure I put them into book form, because I'm hoping that no matter what, books will survive longer than things that are on electronic media.
Yeah,
On the flip
it
side
can't
of
be
that,
changed.
though, I think we're in such chaos and such challenge because there's a doorway that's open right now. I think right now, somewhere cosmically, there's a place where you can walk so deeply that's maybe never been available for a long, long time. And I think a lot of what's going on is designed to distract everybody away from the great possibility that actually exists for you as an individual, right? Not for the group of humanity, not for the non-player characters, not for the world, but for you. I've known a couple of people in the last year, they've managed to do in like 2 months what would normally take somebody 3 or 4 years of work. The advancement that they've gone through is staggering. And I think that possibility is there. So even if things are difficult, even if things are tough, and I know a lot of people feel alone. You've been in many cases, your family is not talking to you anymore. Your friends don't want to talk to you anymore. They think there's something wrong with you. Don't worry about that. There's others that are just like you in that state. There are others who are feeling the same way and who think the same way you do. And find them, go out, look in the comment sections of videos that you like. There's people there that you can communicate and talk to and get to know and recognize you are moving. You have a possibility that's maybe hasn't been around for a long, long time. So no matter how hard it is, remember that and allow yourself to say, okay, whatever step it is you want to take, just take it, because you never know. You just might achieve it way faster than you ever thought.
Well said, sir. Well, thank you so much, you guys. Thanks, Matt, for co-hosting with us. And of course, you can find The Great Deception on all podcast players. And I wanted to end with a little quote from your book, from the note at the beginning, and it pretty much wraps it up. Anyone who says they know for certain what happens after we die, or how and why this universe was created, is lying. And I think that's a great way to end it up. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody in the live chat and the audio listeners. We will catch you guys next time.